Here at Lady Farmer, we talk about so many different aspects of slow and sustainable living, a subject matter that can at times feel confusing, overwhelming, even misleading. And that's why a few years ago, we set out to write a book that might be a guide for those seeking a life of beauty, simplicity, and sustainability.
We're thrilled to be able to offer you our own small guide for cultivating slow living, sustainable simplicity close to home. Available in our online marketplace. In the book, we've woven an easy-to-digest narrative of stories, recipes, tips, resources, ideas, and reflection. This collection of essays and resources will guide you to think about your own relationship to the planet, what you eat, what you wear, and how you live a sustainable lifestyle. It also contains a 21-day slow living challenge of daily thought exercises to lead you in the process.
For you Good Dirt listeners, we are offering free shipping of this wonderful little book with the code TheGoodDirt in our online marketplace. So use the code TheGoodDirt, TheGoodDirt at checkout when you go to purchase your copy of The Lady Farmer Guide to Slow Living in our online marketplace for free shipping. That's The Good Dirt at the Lady Farmer online marketplace for free shipping on The Lady Farmer Guide to Slow Living. We hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, everybody. Once you get a taste of it, you want more. You want more of your own decision making. You want more of your own space between yourself and your happiness and your sense of well-being and the system that's telling you how you need to behave and what you need to buy. We can't chuck the system. It's not going to happen. But what we can do is claim ourselves within it.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now. The farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first part of our special Intro to Slow Living series that we're doing here on the Good Dirt. Over the summer, we're really excited to break down this big topic and bring you 4 different episodes dedicated to really specific aspects of slow living, which is something that we talk about on every single interview. It's always a question we ask our guests: what does slow living mean to them? It's something that we've been exploring for 7, almost 8 years now. It is something that we strive for every day, are not always successful at it, but we'll get into that. And we also want this to be an opportunity for you to think and to open up any questions that you might have around slow living. And we really want this to be a community conversation. So we're so glad you're here. And first episode, number 1 of Intro to Slow Living, will be, what is slow living? Where else would we start besides defining what is slow living? So, Mom, I don't know if you just want to jump in, if you have any thoughts before we get going.
Yeah, so we'll start by reading the quote from the Lady Farmer Guide to Slow Living. It's been 4+ years now since this was written, and we find ourselves returning to it again and again for just a kind of overall definition of what is slow living. But today, we're going to take this quote, this definition, and we're going to pull it apart, and we're going to talk about each one of the points a little more in depth. So here's the quote from the Lady Farmer Guide to Slow Living, answering the question, what is slow living? Our own understanding of slow living has to do, quite simply, with making conscious choices about how we live our lives. It's about paying attention to how we spend our time, money, and resources, and taking a step back from the industrialized systems that have come to provide our daily needs. It's also about observing our own consumer habits, where and how they intersect with quality of life and perpetuate an unsustainable paradigm. Now, that might sound like a bit of a mouthful and a lot to talk about, and that's why we're going to talk about it today. So,
yeah, and I want to point out before we get started, well, I guess we're started. So
yeah.
I want to point out that it might be helpful to come at this too from what we believe slow living is not. And before we do that, I want to make a disclaimer on this conversation and really all conversations we have at The Good Dirt and at Lady Farmer is that as a culture, we love lists and hacks and quick solutions and fixes and things that we should be doing to make our lives better. And this is how you do it. And I just want to point out that I think this conversation is a little bit bigger than that, and it can look a little different depending on who you are and what your situation is. But the underlying root of why we have this conversation is this shared experience of us feeling in general like we want more connection with the earth and with each other, and we want to feel more peace. And that's really what it all comes down to. We are not trying to prescribe. We're not trying to say things are good and bad and right and wrong. It's really a launching off point for asking questions and reflecting and doing all of these things in community and with each other. So I guess I just want to say that to come from a place of encouragement and to inspire, you have it within you. We all have it within ourselves to come at this from whatever way works best for us. Yes, Mother.
Yes. I want to add to that too, that we talk about this all the time. And another disclaimer is that we're not perfect at this. Sometimes we're not even good at it. It is about the practice. It's about the intentionality. Of course, we're going to get more into this. But just to say, we're not the experts here. We're just bringing voice to these things. And we never want to judge or tell people what they need to do or not to do. We're just inviting you to examine the issues and come up with what's right for you.
Definitely. So switching gears again, back to slow living and what we believe it's not in our experience. Now, maybe this won't resonate, but for us, slow living, I can say number one, is not really about speed. It can be slow, as in the literal speed slow. Things can feel slower, but I don't think that's the whole definition. So that's my first thing. It's not necessarily about speed.
Yes. And so many of the people we talk to and we ask the question, what does slow living mean to you? What does it look like in your life? So many people say, my life is not slow.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my life feels very fast. And oftentimes you hear people questioning themselves. Does that mean I'm not slow living, or maybe slow living is not for me? And we're going to get into this more as we go through this discussion. And sometimes the question comes up, why do we even call it slow living? And I've thought about that, because if slow living can still mean you're doing a lot of things, you're very active, you're busy, I think calling it slow living is still appropriate, because in true slow living, I think we're slowing down the decision-making process. We're slowing down in our heads, hopefully, enough to reflect on how we're living, on what we're doing daily, on why we're doing it. To me, that's the slow part.
Maybe it's slowing down the autopilot.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it.
So that's a big one. Get that out of the way.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not busy or that your life isn't full of many things and that you're not constantly moving from thing to thing. We can relate to that.
We sure can.
What else is it not, Mom?
It's not a checklist.
Right.
It's not something that you accomplish and you can say, okay, I've done that now, on to the next thing. I'll say it again. It's a practice. It's a mindset. It is a state of awareness. It's a state of observation. And it is a state of conscious decision making. And I think one of the key things is to just really evaluate why you are making this choice, one choice after another, which leads us right into the quote. Yes, the first sentence there says, slow living is making conscious choices about how we live our lives. It's about paying attention to how we spend our time, money, and resources. Okay, I'll pause there. So I think we get so wrapped up in our daily routine and just getting through the day that we don't even stop to ask ourselves why we're doing a certain thing. And this is key.
Can I jump in too?
Yes.
And say another thing that this is not, as we get into it, is this is not only for people who don't have to work 9 to 5 or, don't have kids. It's not just luxury time flexibility. It's not exclusive to people who don't have to work, all of those things. I just want to say that. So when we talk about paying attention to how we spend our time, money, and resources, it is going to take some questioning beyond like the immediate automatic answers, as we've said, the autopilot. So
yes,
just asking a graceful, autopilot, please sit down. Let me think through that.
Yeah.
Anyways, continue.
I like that. So to your point, Emma, someone might think immediately, well, I have to wake up to my alarm at 5:30 in the morning because I have to go get ready for this job. And perhaps if you're saying that to yourself, you might have certain feelings about this. You might think this is a bad rap. I don't want to do this, but I have no choice. I have to do this. So I think that's where the paying attention begins, not necessarily at this decision or the circumstance itself, but our reaction to that circumstance.
And I want to be super conscious right now in this moment of saying when you question things, it doesn't mean that they're wrong or that you have to do the opposite of that. We're just living in that space of asking questions.
Yes.
So when you say something like, be conscious of how you feel about waking up at 5:30 to go to your job, someone might hear, oh, does that mean that I shouldn't be waking up at 5:30 and going to my job?
No.
That is not what it means.
Oh yeah, I agree. And I'll bring it back to the point that no, we cannot control the circumstances around us. We can't control the fact that we have to get up and go to a job and that's the way it is. What we can possibly question, control, observe, take a closer look at is our reaction to that.
Yes.
And we're just here suggesting that maybe that can be shifted. Let's give an example. Let's take the waking up at 5:30 and someone doesn't feel good about that. They feel like it's not what they want to be doing with their day, or they don't want to go to this job. What's a way that we could shift that feels a little bit more like slow living, like giving some space and ease around that circumstance?
Well, I think that it's a hard question to answer because this is hypothetical.
Yes.
And neither of us personally wake up at 5:30 and drive to a job. But I would say that some of the questioning would start around, okay, so I don't feel great about it. How do I feel about it? This person might feel like they're giving a lot of themselves and their time to this specific job. So then I would ask, well, that seems like there's an imbalance. So are you giving time and attention to yourself, to your family? Do you feel that that is equal? Maybe it's probably not in this case. Okay, well, where can we reallocate some energy, outside your job hours to focus more on yourself, on your family? And you might say, well, I can't do that. But maybe there's ways to build it in to what you're already doing. So for instance, what would make a 5:30 a.m. wake up more delightful, more fun for you? Maybe it's creating a mindful morning ritual that you actually look forward to every morning. Maybe it's treating yourself to a playlist or a podcast or something for your drive. So it's something, build in something for you that you look forward to, that feeds the thing that feels neglected here, because that's probably where this feeling is coming from, this imbalance. And at Lady Farmer on the Good Dirt, we believe that a lot of this comes down to, are you feeding yourself nourishing food? Are you surrounding and seeing yourself in beauty of nature as much as you can every day? Are you feeling dependent on these huge systems at play that take our time and our attention and our money because we feel like we have to give it to them? Mm-hmm. Or do we feel more autonomy in how we spend those things? So that's kind of a long, rambly, open answer, but that's where I would start, is examining the feeling and seeing where the imbalance is, and are there ways that we can try to rebalance that without blowing it all up?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily have to.
Yeah. We're not saying quit your job and move to a farm. We're not saying that.
No.
And as you were talking, Emma, I thought about a very personal example of this. It's been a few years since I had children in the house that had to get up at a certain time and get off to school and so forth.
Yeah, those were stressful times.
They were. And I do remember that it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good to get out of bed in the dark and start hounding kids to get up and get their stuff together. And, it made me feel very jagged and like not a nice person. And I really wanted to cultivate more peace in the morning. And so to your point, what was missing for me there, it was a little bit of nurturing for myself. So I remember instead of getting up and walking into the kitchen and flipping on all the lights, I got into the habit of putting on some soft music and lighting a candle, and I just let it be dim light in there as I began the preparation. And that just shifted the whole thing for me. I mean, maybe not even 5 or 10 minutes before things had to start rolling. Right. But again, that was an adjustment that didn't really take any time. It changed the whole morning vibe for me. So
that's interesting. That's a great example, because that's what I consider like, whoa, you like really slowed things down, but you didn't actually take any more time probably.
Nothing changed on the clock.
That's crazy how, but the dimmer lighting and the soft music, and just your general internal kind of attitude about it. Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, and there's some things about that are pretty concrete. Like, for instance, like flooding yourself with artificial light before the sun comes up. Now, sometimes we have to do that because you have to see to get ready in the dark. I get it. But in this circumstance, it was possible there, to move around in the dim light enough to do what I needed to do before the actual lights had to come on. And the soft music, oh my goodness, music can really influence us in the moment, really profoundly if it's well chosen.
A trick for that too, if it's in a small kitchen space, because I've lived in a few, if you're like, oh, a candle, it's not enough light, whatever, use that under microwave light or any under counter lights before the overhead light. That's my hack.
Right. And you can change some of those under counter bulbs to a warmer light. It has the same effect.
Totally.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, we could go through the day, I guess, with more and more examples of this.
True. But let's stick with our quote. So we've got paying attention. Okay, so that's really what that is. Paying attention And with the caveat, just because you're paying attention and you're asking questions doesn't mean that the opposite must be true. I just want to make that point. Doesn't mean quit your job.
Right. Okay, so paying attention to how we spend our time, money, and resources, and this goes into the next phrase, and taking a step back from the industrialized systems that have come to provide our daily needs. Now, what does that mean? That's kind of a mouthful. It's a lot to think about, but just think about it in terms of food. That's the simplest example to explain, I think, food and clothing. So we need to recognize that we are dependent on a very large industrialized food system that grows the food, that produces it and distributes it. And yes, we do talk a lot about growing your own food and getting local food, and all this is really important and really valuable. But the bottom line is that we're still dependent on the food system. Very, very few of us can claim to be off the grid, and all of our nutritional needs we provide on our own. Those days are pretty much gone. But how can we step back from the food system? How can we reclaim a little more connection to our food than what we've experienced, certainly in this country, for the last half century, 80 years or so? Yes, we can seek out local farms, buy their food, get to know the farmer, talk to them. They're important. Grow whatever you can in either your backyard or your patio or your windowsill. Create some kind of connection between you and your food that leaves out the system. Like I said, we can't leave out the system entirely, but we can cultivate more connection between ourselves and our food, our nourishment, the gift of the earth that feeds us and keeps us alive.
And I would say that exact way of thinking applies to, so when we think of industrialized systems that provide our daily needs, we generally are thinking of three main categories. Food is a really big one, clothing, and shelter. So those are food, clothing, and shelter, right? Those are our basic daily needs.
Yes.
So everything that you just said about connecting to the source of our food, it can be a little bit more abstract when it comes to clothing and shelter, based on the way that we live now in modern life. But the principle is the same. So how can we understand better the huge systems that come between us and the clothes that we put on our backs? And what kind of choices can we make to be a little bit more connected to that and to make us feel like we are being more resourceful and more aware, and we're wearing clothes that we're more proud of, and that we're not following trends mindlessly that are very intentionally constructed to make us spend our well-earned money on them. And the same goes with shelter, and not just the structures that we live in. A lot of times we really don't have control over that, especially by the time we move into a place, but what we fill our homes with and how we care for our homes and how we clean our homes. So we get into a lot of the specifics on each of these things. We'll link some great episodes for you to go back and listen to, and we talk about this over on our Substack. We have these great resource lists of all kinds of things related to how to dig into each of these systems. But that's what we're talking about when we talk about how do we step back from those industrialized systems. So the last sentence of this quote, it's also about observing our own consumer habits, where and how they intersect with quality of life and perpetuate an unsustainable paradigm. So
Yes.
kind of related to what I just said, questioning, observing, paying attention, and I think giving ourselves the opportunity to think about our quality of life as that applies to us and how we feel and what we want, and not necessarily what we're being told or sold.
Yes, and relating personally to observing our own consumer habits. I'll give an example. In years past, I would have thought of an item or two that I needed and would go to Target to pick it up. And you know how much fun Target can be. And by the time I got to checkout, I had a basket full of things, stuff. This became commonplace, almost a joke. Like,
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Guess what? It's designed that way. It's designed.
Yeah.
When you walk in there, it's like a kid in a candy store is like a mom in Target. It's kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I began to observe this in myself, observe what I was putting into the basket, observe what I was hauling home, observe what I was having to find a place for in my home. I even began to feel the pressure of the plastic bags I was bringing home. What I'm saying is, once you start noticing these things, light bulbs go off. And one light bulb being, gosh, I don't need half this stuff. Gosh, I don't need 3/4 of this stuff. Hey, what would happen if I just stopped going to Target?
Mm-hmm.
And when I think I need something, see where else I might be able to get it. And there's all kinds of different solutions to that. But there you go. That's just observing our own consumer habits, not judging anyone else's, but our own.
Yes.
And how they intersect with quality of life. Well, that intersected with my quality of life in a very big way because my house was filling up with stuff. And stuff, like it or not, you have to deal with stuff. You have to put it away. You have to clean it. You have to decide what to do with it when it's done. Personally, I decided I wanted less stuff. And so consumer habits had a lot to do with that.
And I want to hold space too for those of us who really do, like you said, get enjoyment out of Target, and that's like really fun. It's just this is such an interesting conversation around consumerism and like, why is it fun and why do we love it?
Yeah.
And what purpose is it serving and what hole is it filling? And again, this is a whole other podcast probably, but just again, no judgment. Just observation and questioning and holding space for both truths. And also maybe if there are, other areas that you don't feel great about in your life, maybe you're trying to save money in certain ways. And it's not totally obvious that the Target trips are maybe not a necessity. I'm just looking at those things.
And the consumer habits relates to so many things.
Yeah. And it's also not our fault,
no,
necessarily. I would say we also all are a product of the systems that we've been trained in, and it's been programmed so deep into us for so long. It's not your fault.
This is so true. At the same time, I want to empower each of us as individuals to be able to make decisions because on some level, largely unconscious, when we do this sort of thing, we're consenting to a system that might not be serving us well. And to become aware of that and have the autonomy of thought to be able to think independently enough apart from the system to make a decision that's better for you.
Yes.
That's what we're getting at. And also, in the larger sense, the very last phrase, how do these consumer habits perpetuate an unsustainable paradigm? There's a lot of talk these days about sustainability. We talk about it all the time. So again, Emma, do you want to comment on that a little bit? How?
Sure. I just think it's similar to what we've been saying. So even if the questioning you feel in the moment, I'm not sure. I don't want to feel bad about my Target run. I don't want to, there's so enough things to feel bad about.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you should feel bad about it, but I think it's this string of tiny little questions and habits, that all build up to this unsustainable paradigm that we're talking about. So what roles do each of our habits and our daily decisions play in perpetuating, so, keeping us reliant on plastic, reliant on buying things, particularly our happiness, reliant on large corporations. Yeah. And these are all very complex systems.
Yes. And
that are even beyond our scope. But the point is that in our experience, and this why we do all of this, is that tiny little shifts make such a huge difference and have really impacted our lives personally and really changed things for us. It made us so excited about all of this that we spend all of our time talking and sharing about it. So,
yes, and it's very thrilling to discover your own power in all of this. It's very exciting and it's fun, and it grows in you. Once you get a taste of it, you want more. You want more of your own decision making. You want more of your own space between yourself and your happiness and your sense of well-being and the system that's telling you how you need to behave and what you need to buy.
Yep.
And we can't chuck the system. It's not going to happen. But what we can do is claim ourselves within it.
So good.
Yes.
So that's all. That's slow living. Does that answer your question? Just kidding. Yeah. Thank you for tuning into this really fun deep dive into what is slow living.
Yes.
And we're very excited to come back with part 2. That will be on common obstacles and common challenges that come up around slow living. So we'll dig into some of those. And of course, if you have any thoughts about anything we've talked about today or anything regarding slow living, you can call us and leave a voicemail at 443-459-1950. You can also email us at thegooddirtpodcast@gmail.com. You can message us on We Are Lady Farmer on Instagram, and you can join our Substack and chat with us there. So lots of ways to stay in touch, and we will see you next time for common obstacles and challenges around slow living.
See you next time.
Thank you for tuning in, calling in, and spreading the good dirt. We love hearing from you. You can reach our listener voicemail at 443-459-1950. That's 443-459-1950. You can find this number in our show notes and in our Instagram profile.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer, a slow living lifestyle community, and the original music is composed and performed by John Kingsley.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at We Are Lady Farmer. That's We Are Lady Farmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.
Goodbye.